Okay, so Amy Tan, the Bonesetter's daughter, paper 3. Let's take a look at the nuts and bolts for some information that hopefully you know already. So of course it is paper 3 if you are doing world literature. It is unfortunately a closed book exam, so there's no escaping having to learn quotations. It's a whopping 38.5% of your grade. I think your poetry, your unseen poetry, which most of you sat today, that's 25%. There are 2 questions, so there's 1 extract question and there's a whole text question. And of course, this is the question that requires you to reference textual references. That sounded very awkward as a sentence. And use direct quotations as well. And it's 1 hour, 30 minutes. So divide your time appropriately, 45 minutes for each, but also account for planning. And as mentioned, you need to remember some key quotations and quite a lot of them actually. Now, in terms of the extract, you've got it there in front of you. I would aim for 2 to 3 quotations. I mean, there's no excuses really. If you've got the extract there, I would probably aim for 3 actually. For the whole text question, 2 quotations in each paragraph, in addition to textual references peppered throughout the whole response, is usually what is expected for a top band response. And I would opt for a typical 5-paragraph essay structure for each question. So that's an introduction, 3 main body paragraphs, and a conclusion. Now, I did pop these on the screen before, but just have a look at the type of questions that have come up already. I mean, some of them are pretty difficult and I would most definitely struggle with some of them. How does Tan vividly depict life in the mountain village Immortal Heart? Explore the ways in which Tan memorably portrays the Chang family. I mean, obviously these are key moments in the novel and hopefully you've read this novel more than once. However, to learn specific quotations for each of these questions, I think it's quite a daunting, if not Herculean task. Basically, it could be about any character, any theme, anything that has happened in the novel, not to instill you with fear, because I know you guys are going to do absolutely great. Anyway, let's get on to what this video is about, and it's looking at my top 10 quotations for any question about Ruth and LuLing. So these are some really go-to quotations that I recommend you do learn. And if the question is about Ruth or LuLing or the relationship, do try and use them, because I've selected them because A, they're easy to remember, and B, you can say a lot about the language. So these are some questions that I've just made up. All of the quotations that I'm going to go through, all 10 could be applied to these questions. So how is Ruth presented throughout the novel? Quite a standard question. How does Ruth's character change over the course of the novel? To what extent do we sympathise with LuLing's character? How does the relationship between Ruth and LuLing change throughout the novel? How does Tan present the character of LuLing? What are the key challenges Ruth faces in the novel and how do they shape her character? You get the idea, guys. So, without further ado, let's analyse the top 10 quotations that I've selected. So the first one, as mentioned earlier, is LuLing's threats to die were like earthquakes. You'll notice the features on the left-hand side. So these are the things that I would zoom into. These are aspects of the language or structure. So how will we analyze this quotation? Well, with all of the quotations, we need to contextualize them first of all. We don't just want to drop quotations in, otherwise your essay becomes quite choppy. So within your analysis, you need textual reference to show a good understanding of the novel. And of course, you need to sort of place the quotation through appropriate context, and then you need to analyze the quotation. So let's take a read. From the onset of the novel, because this happens quite early on, Tan characterizes LuLing as emotionally volatile, frequently threatening to commit suicide whenever she and Ruth have any kind of dispute. Ruth is acutely aware of this and comments that her threats to die were like earthquakes. Tan's striking imagery emphasizes LuLing's unpredictable behavior and the constant looming threat of her taking such extreme measures without any warning. Some readers may interpret LuLing's threats as a means of asserting control over Ruth when she feels powerless to resolve their issues through conventional communication. And that really is what an A-star analysis looks like, guys. So our second one, of course, is that very important tea tray symbol. So let's take a read. From early on in the novel, we learn that Ruth suffers an accident after throwing herself off a slide and breaking her arm. Textual reference. I'm contextualizing the quotation. As a result, Ruth stops talking for a time, astonished by how kindly her mother, LuLing, suddenly treats her. When LuLing introduces the tea tray and writing in sand to facilitate communication, Ruth spells out the word doggy, Precious Auntie's term of endearment for LuLing. Tan uses the tea tray as a symbol of the fractured relationship between Ruth and LuLing, highlighting Ruth's need to resort to deception to communicate honestly with her mother. Some readers might applaud Ruth's manipulation here as she finally takes control of her life and refuses to let LuLing suppress her. The tea tray empowers Ruth, allowing her to manipulate LuLing, who is desperate for forgiveness from Precious Auntie. Number 3, quite a long quotation, but you'll see or notice that I've put some words in bold. These are the words that I'm going to embed into my analysis. We've got a lot to say in terms of language. So I'm looking at the symbol, I'm looking at the visual imagery, the colour imagery, and I'm linking to theme as well. Let's take a read. So during a family gathering to celebrate the full moon festival, textual reference, contextualising the quotation again to show a thorough understanding, Tan brings the central theme of lies and deception to the forefront by using the pearl necklace, a last-minute purchase years ago for LuLing's birthday, as a vehicle to illustrate Ruth's propensity to lie. When LuLing proudly shows the pearls off to everyone, Tan describes how the dark pearls glistened and likens the necklace to a gift that has risen from the bottom of the sea. Tan's use of visual imagery is striking, using the necklace as a symbol to represent how Ruth understands that all of the lies she has been telling will eventually come to the surface. Tan's use of the colour imagery dark alludes to the secrecy and lies that permeate their relationship. Arguably, there is a realization here that Ruth must start telling the truth if she is ever to repair her relationship with her mother. Number 4, her slack-skinned limb felt like the bony wing of a baby bird. So we've got the simile there, the sibilance, the plosive B sound, and connotations. Let's take a read. When Ruth takes LuLing back from the hospital after learning about her mother's dementia diagnosis, she compares LuLing's arm to a slack-skinned limb that feels like the bony wing of a baby bird. Tan's striking simile poignantly highlights LuLing's deteriorating condition. Furthermore, the sibilance in slacked skin, so the repetition of the S sound, and the plosive sounds in bony baby bird emphasize her frailty and vulnerability, contrasting with her fiery and headstrong personality. Additionally, the image of the baby bird connotes a sense of helplessness and dependence, mirroring LuLing's reliance on others, specifically her daughter, as her illness progresses. Interestingly, Ruth experiences an epiphany of sorts here. The roles have been reversed and the roles between her and her mother need to be reversed. Despite their turbulent relationship, Ruth realizes that her mother needs her more than ever. This moment reveals an emerging sense of empathy in Ruth's character. So a really poignant and really important quotation there, guys. So number 5, and it's a metaphor and very easy to remember, and we can say a lot about it. So it was Ruth's job to untangle such puzzles. So after LuLing receives her official diagnosis, Ruth realizes that she has seen the signs of dementia everywhere. I've just sort of shoehorned in another quotation there because it's easy to remember, and again it gives further context. Observing that LuLing's symptoms are worsening and becoming more conspicuous, However, Ruth understands that it is her job to untangle such puzzles. Tan uses this as a metaphor to illustrate the long and difficult process Ruth faces in coming to terms with LuLing's diagnosis. Ruth will have to significantly adjust her life to ensure her mother's well-being and find enough time to learn about her mother's history, heritage and identity. This understanding is crucial for Ruth to fully understand herself and begin to reconcile with her mother. Number 6, one of my favourite quotations, and you won't find this quotation analysed anywhere on the website. I haven't seen it analysed, but I think it's really pertinent because it tells us about the roles of Ruth and LuLing. So the bungalow resembled a dollhouse. So I've labelled it here as a metaphor, maybe it's a symbol as well. So when LuLing and Ruth moved to a new bungalow in Berkeley, Tan likens the bungalow to a dollhouse. So that's all you need to remember, guys. Just one word, dollhouse, easy. Revealing much about their family dynamic and relationship. This metaphor suggests the tight grip LuLing has on Ruth, especially during her childhood, as she wants Ruth to assume the role of a doll. Passive, inactive and controlled by others. Just as dolls are moved from room to room only when someone else wants, Ruth's autonomy is severely restricted. This highlights the unhealthy aspect of their relationship, implying that LuLing desires to keep her daughter locked up forever, devoid of freedom and independence. Number 7, she was alone. No one could save her. I've labelled this as 2 consecutive declaratives, so 2 statements so we can get marks for structure. In a poignant flashback, readers are confronted with a distressing moment when Ruth, as a young girl, falls victim to blank at the hands of a neighbour named Lance. Despite her attempt to confide in her mother, LuLing responds by blaming Ruth and dismissing the incident entirely. This pivotal moment crystallizes Ruth's profound sense of isolation as she realizes that she is alone and that no one can save her. Tan's deliberate use of 2 consecutive declaratives underscore Ruth's emotional detachment and the fractured nature of her relationship with her mother, even in her youth. Ruth's bravery in confiding in LuLing is admirable. However, LuLing's subsequent belittlement exacerbates Ruth's emotional turmoil, leaving lasting scars that reverberate into her adult life. These early fractures in their relationship compel Ruth to either withhold information from LuLing or resort to falsehoods as coping mechanisms. So showing an understanding of the entire novel is going to get you lots of marks. Number 8. So cleaning helped her feel that she was removing the clutter from her mother's mind. So the only words that you need to remember, guys, removing the clutter from her mother's mind. I've labelled this as a metaphor. So Ruth's newfound understanding that she will inevitably have to become LuLing's caregiver leads her to help her tidy up her mother's disarrayed apartment. Ruth likens the act of cleaning to removing the clutter from her mother's mind. Tan's poignant metaphor highlights Ruth's comprehension of the complexity of LuLing's illness and underscores the importance of family. Despite their often tumultuous relationship, Ruth's actions demonstrate her unwavering love and devotion to her mother. This metaphor emphasizes Ruth's recognition of her role in providing care and support, reflecting her deep commitment to her family. Almost there, guys. So number 9, another easy metaphor to remember. So 2 people caught in a sandstorm. So during another flashback to Ruth's childhood, a time when she was determined to rebel and carve out her own identity, she kept a diary. In the diary, she expressed her hatred for her mother and her wish that her mother would die. Textual reference. LuLing, upon reading Ruth's diary, attempts suicide. Consequently, Ruth likens both herself and her mother to 2 people caught in a sandstorm, highlighting the constant interference and antagonistic nature of their relationship. Tan's metaphor is particularly striking. Sandstorms obscure vision, create disorientation and cause pain and discomfort. This underscores the idea that Ruth's relationship with her mother is almost impossible to navigate and brings her significant pain. Moreover, it suggests that both Ruth and LuLing are blinded to the fact that both are responsible for creating such an unhealthy family dynamic. So our last quotation, which brings us to the end of the novel pretty much, it was already worth Ruth's while to see her mother so happy. So not a lot we can say about the language. I mean, are you really going to zoom in on the adjective happy? I just struggled to find a quotation which sort of tied everything together and that was remotely happy. So, but this is my analysis, so I've tried, guys. So Tan's novel concludes on a happy note, with LuLing finding peace in the knowledge that her daughter understands her history. Furthermore, LuLing embarks on her first intimate relationship in years with Mr. Tang, textual reference, helping her feel valued and secure in her place in the world. Whilst LuLing's tendency to complain remains intact, I use that word propensity, she just can't help herself, Ruth is deeply comforted by seeing her mother so happy. Tang carefully positions the reader to reflect on the journey both characters have undergone. Their paths of self-discovery involve evaluating themselves, each other, and the dynamics of their relationship, ultimately revealing that both have had to put in the work in order to strengthen their bond. Now, let's end this video with, a hypothetical situation. Let's say you got this question: how does Tan explore the theme of mother-daughter relationships through Ruth and LuLing? Let's take two of the quotations. The first two quotations I went through and used the Pezzer structure. And this is what a good analytical paragraph should look like, with two quotations. From the onset of the novel, it becomes evident that Ruth's relationship with her mother, LuLing, is deeply fractured, resting on a precarious foundation of falsehoods and a lack of affection. Tang quickly characterizes LuLing as emotionally volatile, often resorting to threats of suicide whenever she and Ruth have any kinds of dispute. Ruth is acutely aware of this and comments that her threats to die were like earthquakes. Tan's striking imagery emphasizes LuLing's unpredictable behavior and the constant looming threat of her taking such extreme measures without any warning. Some readers may interpret LuLing's threats as a means of asserting control over Ruth when she feels powerless to resolve their issues through conventional communication. Note the transition sentence. So as the novel progresses, we learn that Ruth suffers an accident after throwing herself off a slide and breaking her arm. As a result, Ruth stops talking for a time, astonished by how kindly her mother LuLing suddenly treats her. When LuLing introduces a tea tray and writing in the sand to facilitate communication, Ruth spells out the word doggy, Precious Auntie's term of endearment for LuLing. Tan uses the tea tray as a symbol of the fractured relationship between Ruth and LuLing, highlighting Ruth's need to resort to deception to communicate honestly with her mother. Some readers might applaud Ruth's manipulation here, as she finally takes control or agency over her life and refuses to let LuLing suppress her. The tea tray empowers Ruth, allowing her to manipulate LuLing, who is desperate for forgiveness from Precious Auntie. That's what a successful main body paragraph looks like, guys. You might use a different acronym, but point, evidence, zoom in, analyze. Your paragraphs need to contextualize the quotations. There should be textual reference peppered throughout your two quotations and exploration of the language, structural techniques, etc.